He's coming. There he is. Okay. We are called to order. Roll call, please. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Or at least that we have better music.
I know.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we got rid of the awkward 80s music. We can begin.
Hey, even that. My favorite.
Okay, roll call, please.
Dean Felder.
Here.
Goods.
Here.
Maniscalco. Cedro.
Here.
Miranda.
Here.
Carlson.
Here.
Vieira.
Here. Okay, we are here for the fiscal year 2020 first public hearing on the budget. And may I please have a motion to open public hearing and operating? We have a motion from Councilman Citro, I believe a second from Councilman Goods. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, for the purposes of the record and clarity for the public, this is the motion to open the public hearing for both the operating and the capital budgets.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, that is bad 80s.
That's Depeche Mode.
No.
Yeah.
Depeche Mode's way better than
It's a Cruel Summer. That's a great song. Is it Cool or Cruel Summer? Cruel. That's a great song. That's their only good song. Okay. And Councilman Miranda, sir, if you could please read the first public hearing statement.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is the first public hearing statement. This is the first public hearing statement of the City of Tampa for the fiscal year 2020 budget. The proposed millage rate is 6.2076 mils, which is 6.7 more than the rollback millage of 5.8181 mils. Property tax funds are used to support the general fund operating budget of the city. This fund includes such departments as fire, rescue, police, human resources, and park and recreation.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from council at this time before we take public comment? Okay, seeing none, we move forward to public comment for the operating and capital budgets. If anyone is here to publicly comment on the budget, you have 3 minutes, and now is your time to come forward. Okay, there being none, are there any questions or comments from Tampa City Council? Councilman Dingfelder.
Yes. I see Mr. Aguero is here, I guess on behalf of the administration. But Dennis, you and I and Mr. Bennett went through some questions the other day, and there were still some outstanding issues I was waiting to hear back from you guys on. But let me just run through some of the questions generally and for the benefit of our fellow council members. I'm on page 6 of the that back section, what's it called, the budget supplement. And it appears to me that Tampa Convention Center has revenue in excess of expenses, maybe to the tune of like $3 million, something like that, give or take.
And I'm sorry, what page was that, sir?
I'm on page 6 of the budget supplement in the back of my book. And there's a whole slew of TCC items, about 10 of them, no more than that probably. But anyway, but looking at the total, it appears that the Convention Center has revenue in excess of expenses. And I was just wondering, we as the CRA, and I know the CRA budget is somewhere tucked in here as well, have been asked to pay the capital improvements for the convention center. I think the city / convention center / CRA borrowed X amount of dollars a couple of years ago, and we're paying it back to the tune of what, $5 million a year or something. And I'm just wondering why that is. If the convention center is one of our money makers, then why is it a drain on the CRA?
I can tell you this based on our discussion the other day, that the CRA is making a bank note payment of $4.2 million, partially from the core and non-core funds and the tourism development tax. In terms of the larger philosophical question as to why you're supplementing the convention center, I don't know offhand. Do you know offhand? Yeah. Mike Perry, Budget Officer.
Mike Perry, City's Budget Officer. And while the 20 budget may show a net revenue increase from the convention center, their revenues are solely reliable or subject to the whims of the market. And so it's not a reliable revenue source that the CRA revenues are, because we have a dedicated TIF contribution that the city is required to make to the CRAs.
But the CRA doesn't get, I mean, in a positive year like this, I believe this is a positive year this past year for the convention center, correct?
That is correct.
Approximately $3 million, something?
Yes, sir.
In a positive year like that, are they paying the CRA back?
No, sir, they are not.
Okay. And what happens to their excess revenues?
They go into the general revenue, the general fund, to pay for other general governmental support, TPD, TFR, Parks and Rec, T&I, planning and development. It's all part of the general revenue stream. And don't forget, it's only been in recent history that the convention center has been making money.
How long has that been?
In the last 2 or 3 years, sir. Prior to that, the general fund had to contribute to the operating support of the convention center. So over time, it will balance itself out.
Okay. All right, thank you. On page 12 in the same item, this is under expense report. I noticed we have approximately $6 million in this next year's budget of overtime. And I was wondering if the administration can speak to that. It seems to be pretty consistent over the years from 2017 until now, with a slight decrease this year in overtime. Are we understaffed, and that's why we need to pay overtime, or what?
Well, we have been making an attempt, and I think we were successful this fiscal year, and I think the projections, if I am looking at the line item here, you'll recall, or you'll see, in fiscal year 17, the actual amount of overtime was nearly $7 million. We have reduced that, I'd say, pretty significantly to a projected overtime this year of just over $6.3 million, so about $700,000. As you look next year, we anticipate we're going to continue to reduce the amount of overtime to 5.7, almost $5.8 million. That's a combination of things. First of all, management paying closer attention to the overtime expenditures, which I think will carry forward from the current year into next year. And you may recall we have increased the extra duty rate associated with police department and special events. We anticipate that's going to lead to less need for overtime as we staff those positions with officers earning, quote, extra duty as opposed to working for the city on an overtime basis. In answer to your question, are we understaffed? You know, I can't tell you what the right answer is. Of course, we still, you will recall from previous presentations that compared to our position complement before the Great Recession, we're still about 500 positions down. You've seen the graphs that show our number of positions related to the how many thousands of citizens and customers that we serve, and the citizens keep going up, and the positions have been continue to be on a downward track. So we have less positions. We've talked about employees doing more with less, and I certainly think they're doing that. Some of that will feed into the overtime as you use overtime dollars to use those overtime dollar resources to get the job done in the absence of some of those positions. Now, having said that, as I've said before, there's a balance between having the flexibility to use overtime funding and increasing the number of positions and employees you have, which are much more difficult and troublesome at reducing if and when they're necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few more questions, but Mr. Goods wanted to jump in on this overtime issue.
I'm a little confused. I'm trying to figure out how extra duty pay will help with overtime, because extra duty pay is considered an officer who wants to work extra duty. So we just raised the stadium pricing, going to try, I don't believe that's been voted on yet, to get that number up. The extra duty rate is going up for the stadium. So most officers will work because they want to work. So I'm trying to figure out how does that correlate the city paying overtime for jobs versus a young lady working extra duty. I'm confused there.
Certainly. Over the past couple of years, we have found that the former extra duty rate is simply not enough incentive to fill the positions that are required for extra duty assignments. And when we can't fill those positions, we need officers to do it on an overtime basis, which is much more expensive than an extra duty rate, even the new extra duty rate, and includes benefits, pensionable expenses, things like that. So you're getting, hopefully, and again, we just implemented this, you're getting the resources necessary at an overall cheaper price.
But the rate is only for special events. It's not for regular extra duty pay, correct?
No, sir. No, it is for extra duty. There are different tiers depending upon what the event is.
Explain what those would be, because I'm thinking stadium would be a special event.
Mm-hmm.
A guy working at a bar, unless it's some type of alcohol stand, they're having some big concert, might be a special event. But anything else, I don't see what would be a special event. That's just a regular extra duty job.
And I think they're roughly synonymous, extra duty and special event. We pay officers an extra duty rate for functioning and providing a resource at a special event. And those special events can go from, just as you said, maybe you're at a restaurant, maybe you're at a bar, or maybe you're at the Super Bowl.
Is the union understanding that?
That I couldn't tell.
Can the union speak to that? Are you an understanding of that?
And let's wait, let's have proper procedure
I
here.
don't know.
Yeah, if we can, Mr. Shelby, can we take public comment after? In other words, well, you know what, actually, public comment's already passed.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody from the union wants to come up, and speak to this issue, I have no problem with that, but.
It's council's pleasure, if it wishes to address a question to somebody who's in the audience. Council has done that in the
Okay,
past.
then they can come up, that's fine.
Councilman, I'm Darla Portman, president of the PBA. This is Jimmy Owens, he's my vice president. To speak on the off-duty, the off-duty is a rate that's paid by the vendor. The reason why it's going up in rate is because he's right. It was so low, the officers weren't taking care of it, but they were pulling from patrol on the street to fill those positions. There was no overtime being, and as far as I know, was giving at all. So that's why the rate's going up, so more officers will want to work off-duty.
I could speak directly from that, coming from patrol supervisor last year, and we were pulling people off our regular squads to work that event. And it wasn't pulling people from home to come in to work overtime. They were pulling them, especially at Raymond James Stadium. It happened all throughout football season last year. But there wasn't anything out there where an officer was off to come in and work for overtime to fill in those voids at the stadium. That did not occur.
They were pulling from patrol from the street, so there would be 2 officers per squad being pulled from the street to go work those gigs that weren't stadium jobs, arena or stadium.
So that was causing low manpower on the streets. Therefore, the chief and the staff went to these vendors to bring up the prices so that people would actually work these, so our streets would be manned properly.
Thank you.
Well,
That's all good,
Are you like Mr. Dingfelder?
Chairman, I'd be glad to yield to anybody else who has questions.
Anyone else have any questions? Oh, yeah, of course, that's fine. Councilman.
About the convention center thing?
Sure. Right.
Sorry to go back. I didn't want to speak out of turn. Just about the convention center, and I'm not going to argue the point or anything, but I have had people from the tourism community, especially the hoteliers, come and say that they would rather, since they feel like some of their money is going toward the convention center, that they feel like we should look at the convention center as an economic engine, not just as a profit center. And I know you said it's a new thing, but as we get the new head of economic development, it might be worth, in part, meeting with the tourism community just to see Are there some events that we should try to get intentionally because they'll drive the economy? And I don't know exactly what they mean or what the specifics are, but that's the feedback they gave.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman?
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, if I could. Is that my time's up?
No, mine was.
Evening,
John Bennett, Chief of Staff.
Evening, John. Last week, this council spent quite a bit of time during our budget workshop on a particular vendor, TBAE, also known as some other similar organization, but you know who they are, in regard to the fact that they got cut out of the budget 2 years ago for $109,000. This council voted 5-2, respectfully asking the administration to put them back in. As of tonight, I haven't received anything in writing similar to the document that we received the afternoon of the budget workshop to indicate the administration doing that. Have I missed a memo or what? And part of my concern is, I asked Mr. Shelby before the meeting started, I said, in regard to process, if we're still talking about items that might come and go into the budget, where are we in terms of process? Does something like that need to come in tonight so we're all on the same page? And if so, I'm prepared to make a similar motion that I made last week and see where it goes. Or is that not necessary because it's going to come in otherwise? But so anyway, a lot of moving parts to that question, John. But where are we on that issue?
Yeah, so being at the workshop and hearing this firsthand and talking to you offline, obviously we heard the group come up and talk about what they're trying to do in the community. I think everybody agreed that they're trying to continue to provide that service as a nonprofit. The challenge is, I've asked for a few things. Some of them that we received, looked at their budget. We asked them firsthand, or you did at least, what their funding looked like over the past couple of years. I think the concern is that the funding has been cut, and we're trying to figure out what their state of health is as far as delivering those services, even though the ones that we've seen have been really well received by the community. So there is no decision at this point. The administration has looked at it. We've looked at the data. We've looked at that. I think the position that we're in right now is to try and support, as far as today goes, is trying to support them in any way possible to keep them afloat until we can see what other funding options are out there.
Well,
specifically grants and
I just had a thought, because I think your sustainability concern is legitimate.
Right.
I don't think you want to hand an organization $100,000 for the potential that they could go under a week or a month or a quarter later. But perhaps the compromise could be to have it be doled out $25,000 per quarter. So at least we're only on the hook for $25,000 as we go, and hopefully they right their ship. I think having the full faith and credit of the city behind them, as you and I discussed, in regard to going for grants and maybe teaming up on grants and other charitable folks who might want to help them, would really be there'd be a nice signal from the city that we're here to work with them, and maybe other folks are too. So anyway, well, procedurally, I think you answered my question. I haven't missed any memo yet.
No, you have not.
I guess I'll ask Mr. Shelby then, what he might suggest, from this body, if this body wants to continue along like we did 5-2 last week.
Well, Council, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I can. Just a reminder that Section 7.07, the budget changes, is that after this budget passes, the way that Council can change the budget is upon the recommendation of the mayor. So it is the mayor, after this point, after this budget is passed, that initiates the budget changes. You may want to talk to the staff. We have a new administration, a new mayor, and perhaps a new agreement or a new process about how going about it. But my suggestion would be, if council wishes to add that in the budget, I should also remind you that it does not necessarily require the mayor to spend money that's allocated. It is actually, that's an administrative function. So council cannot compel that the way this government is structured. So that being said, the best suggestion I could make is I don't know whether they're able to relay the administration's position, but I had an opportunity to speak briefly with Mr. Torito about the process of the way you intended to move forward if council did have changes. And I believe you suggested that there would be an agreement to have a resolution brought after the passage of the budget, that it is intended to be passed as it is presented. So if you want to expand on that for the purposes of information.
And let me just chime in, Mr. Chairman, real quick. Mr. Bennett, I have some other kind of technical questions as I had earlier. Perhaps in the interim, you might perhaps chat with the mayor and about the 25,000 per quarter idea.
Sure. No, I understand the spirit of the ask. I understand the metrics of the ask, and I'm happy to have those discussions.
Thank you.
And I recently got the budget copy, so I acknowledge that I got a copy of their budget a couple hours ago, so thank you.
Mr. Torito, I guess I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Sal to the legal department. In the past, since you have come back after a bit of a gap there, in the past couple of years when this has come up, if the administration has agreed to your change, you're not changing the budget at this particular time. What it is, once there's an agreement reached, rather than go through the whole process of having to rearrange everything in the budget now, if the administration concurs, that they will come back in the first meeting in October and add that to the budget. But rather than make the change in this document at this particular time, it gets to be a little bit more cumbersome. That's how it's been done in the last couple of years, if there's been agreement between the administration and the city council.
So it's on a handshake,
And it's more than a handshake. If the mayor and the administration makes that promise, that they've kept it every time.
It sounds like a handshake, but that's my handshake. I'd do something, I'd stick with it. And I know Mr. Bennett does
Handshake
too.
on camera.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Do you want some more of my questions?
Oh, yes, sir, by all means, yeah. Go for it.
Again, I'm in the supplement, page 13, under other contractual services. This is line 534007. So, and Dennis, this is something you and I talked about a little bit at the last meeting. So in 2017, we had contractual services to the tune of $4 million. It jumped significantly in 18 to $6 million, and now in 2020, we're at $7 million. Again, this goes to that labor issue. What's going on with our labor, and why do we continually go outside, which I can't help but think is more expensive than hiring employees?
Yes, so in this particular instance, it has a couple of, I don't want to say anomalies, but big ticket items in fiscal year 20. After discussing with you at the meeting, we've gone back and done some research. The police department, for instance, has a little over almost $1.6 million identified in fiscal year 20 compared to fiscal year 19 for the body-worn cameras that you all are familiar with, middle school crossing guards, and other miscellaneous contracts. But as I believe you all are aware, body-worn cameras are not only going to be a significant asset expense, but a significant operating expense, and that's where you'll find the expense in this particular supplement. You also have some expenses in there associated with parks and recreation grounds maintenance, which again, I know we've talked about that before, to the tune of a little over $200,000. So in answer to your question, again, there's a balance in there somewhere in terms of what sort of in-house resources we use to get the job done with our employees and what sort of third-party vendor resources we use to get the job done. But I did want to make you aware there's a specific big-ticket item in there that's inflating it.
Okay. Thank you. Item on page 17, under Personnel Services and Benefits Budget Reserve. What's kind of neat about these pages is it does give us a little bit of history.
Yes.
Because it gives us the 17 numbers, the 18 numbers, and the 18 numbers, 19 numbers, and then the prospective 2020 numbers, so you can sort of see what direction we're headed. So in the budget reserves, and I've always said all along it's important to have reserves, it appears in 17 we were at 0, 18 we were at 0, 19 we were at $1 million, and the recommended budget for this coming year is $12,547,000. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, you will recall we discussed this at the meeting, and based on your question, I went back and did some research. This is a special reserve. The funding you see here is funding being held in abeyance pending the completion of contract negotiations with the collective bargaining units. Whatever pay raises that we arrive at in negotiations with the unions, we will pull from that reserve funding. This is separate and apart, not to be confused, and I know we throw the word reserve around quite a bit. This is separate and apart from the fund balance reserve 23% that you hear me harping on, for lack of a better word.
Great, I appreciate the clarification. So how much is the fund balance reserve in dollar amounts, that 23%? What was it last year and how much is it coming up?
It is $105 million anticipated or recommended to you all for the fiscal year 20 budget. It was a little under $99 million in the current fiscal year. Again, an addition of $5.7 million in an effort at attaining that 23%.
So this fiscal year, how much are we putting in to continue to build it?
$5.7 million.
5.7 million.
Yes, sir.
And how much did we put in last year?
Now that I don't know. Anybody know off the top of their head? We'll get that for you.
Okay. And while we're waiting, and that's generally out of the general fund?
Yes, sir. General fund revenues.
Okay. So again, not to belabor the point, but when we're talking about $100,000, which by my estimate is 0.01% of the total billion-dollar budget, we have 5.7 million in reserves, going to reserves this year. So if we used 100,000 of that for that particular item that this council voted for 5-2, it would be 5.6 million in reserves.
5.69.
5.69. Okay. And last year was what?
Last year, in our 2019, I'm going to give you the projection because, of course, we have a budget that was adopted almost a year ago, and then we have things that happened since then. We anticipate we're going to end this current fiscal year 19, at just a little over $100 million.
So last year the contribution was how much?
Last year, we increased our fund balance $3.7 million.
Okay. So
from 2018 to 2019.
Right.
And
so we have an additional 2 million approximately that we're adding to the reserves over and above what we did last year.
Over and above the addition we did last year.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, as I asked for a little earlier, and if he's amenable, I'd ask before we are requested to vote, if we could take perhaps a 10-minute recess.
No
and
problem with that.
Mr. Bennett could pursue that opportunity for compromise that I suggested. And obviously, if anybody has any other questions before the recess.
Let me just, if I may, thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much. And I understand what Mr. Dingfelder said, very noble. But as you well know, as your budget number grows, so does the number that you have to put into reserve growth by that equal sum. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's one item that you have to realize is there. The second one, and most important in my book anyway, is that there's two things that need always addressing no matter what government you're in: the very young and the very elderly. And the young people, we started and working well with Parks and Rec, giving them the opportunity to stay here longer hours, and I think that's worked beautifully. You see, all of us were young once. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I was no angel. However, I had a place to go called Cascaden Park. and it had amenities there. And go back in history, and what we had then, we don't have now. Each park in the city of Tampa had at least 2 employees from the Parks Department. One that handled the girls' athletics, and the other one that handled the young boys' athletics. And the amount of time that we spent at the park, I think, was equal to or greater than the amount of time we spent in school, because we were always at the park. It's very common why we didn't have the amenities we have today. There was really no cell phones, in fact, none at all. There was television when I was young, but some of us didn't have it, and I was one of them. And like most in those areas in Ybor City, most of us didn't have anything but the park. So all of us were at the park day and night during the summer months. And it kept us out of trouble, but it taught us more than just get out of trouble. It taught us how to deal with people, how to talk to people. Because when you interact and you have sports, and by the way, I was very happy to see when they had that basketball, Mr. Goods was there and I was there, and the kids that I saw, the energy that I saw at that basketball court was unbelievable. And the kids were getting along so well with each other, even though they were playing against each other. That's how you built up what you're going to be later on in life. So you have to take care of the young and the elderly. In my book, when you look at all these grants that come in about for this, fixing this, there's not enough money to fix 5% of what's needed. And roofs and houses that'll fall. Yeah, we go out and paint your heart out and do things like that. But for every house we paint, there's 1,000 that need it. For every roof we fix, there's 1,000 that need it. And what it is that I don't want them to be forgotten. And I understand what he's saying, but if I have to give some money up, in my opinion, I want it to go to youth or the elderly, because those are the two in society. The youth are going to be the next leaders, and the elderly are forgotten when they're led. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Councilman Goods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your leadership. I guess what bothers me, I put a couple of items on the floor, have not heard back about those items, and Mr. Miranda lead me right into it when you talk about the elderly and children. You know, again, I made it clear last time my community is hungry, and they were expecting a wow to come to our community. I was willing to compromise. We have a CRA that's willing to put up some dollars, but we need dollars coming from the general fund. I still stand by our center. We need a mega center. I think this council realizes that. They understand that. It was noble about the $400,000 to do another study, or we're past studies in District 5. Studies are good, but when we continue to study, we continue to blow money. And I understand. I'm confused. I just talked to our legal counsel, and he says it seems like the rules have been changing back and forth in reference to how we get things in the budget from this council with the administration. But I'm prepared to see the council to put a motion on the floor in reference to what I asked for in reference to my district. I think it's needed. I think it's warranted. Number 2 is the fire rescue car. I don't understand the pushback on the fire rescue car of a full-time rescue car in my district. You've just sent those two peak cars for the emergency services to other places. Those are 2 cars that are here that could be utilized. I don't understand where the extra money cost has to come in for that car when we have 2 existing cars here. I'm not understanding. A car was taken out of service, 10, 12, 13 years ago from East Tampa, has never been replaced. I'm just not understanding what is the pushback on that. And I know the union is here, and I'd like to hear their concern about that, because these are the guys who have to go out there and are working hard and are battling every day. And I just want to hear from them and see what their take on it, because the community's asking about it, and I'm going to fight for my issues. I'm going to fight to the end. It's the 4th quarter. I'm at the goal line. I have a team up here, and I need somebody to help me score. If Mr. Greco can speak on that, I wish he would.
And if Mr. Greco and Mr. Carter want to come up, go ahead.
Joe Greco, Tampa Firefighters President, and Andrew Carter, who's Vice President of the union. So the concern that Mr. Goods brought to us was that about the rescue car that once was at Station 10. That rescue car was removed from there and put at Station 7, which is at Hanna in Nebraska. It was never replaced. That area of East Tampa, everything from Orient Road to 22nd Street, from Port of Tampa all the way to MLK, and actually it runs even farther, but if you can visualize that size area, that's all run by one rescue car. It's the largest district in the city. Rescue 4 runs that, but then every other rescue car around there backfills. So 5, 1, 18, and anybody else that's needed will have to run into that area. I believe that staff came back with putting another peak car at Station 16. A peak car is paid overtime, so time and a half, and it's manned with a lieutenant and a paramedic. We're all paramedics, but that car is particularly manned every day except for Sunday and Monday. It's manned with a lieutenant and a paramedic. Lieutenants make quite a bit of money, and when you pay them overtime, we just don't see where it's a good idea to spend overtime money when you could staff it full-time at straight pay and just by moving some people around in the city. We have staff to do it. They need to be reallocated, used more efficiently, and there's staff there to do that. We also have rescue cars, so I don't know where for this year, what I'm saying is instead of going back into the budget and trying to reallocate money, we do have some reserve units that if a rescue car broke down, a frontline rescue car, they would go straight to those reserve units that are sitting right at 19th and 34th Street today. Why couldn't we just staff one of those rescue cars full-time? That unit came out of there 17 years ago, and it's never been replaced. I don't know that it was the city's intention to let it go 17 years. At the time, I was at Station 10. That rescue car was removed because Station 10 was in disrepair. They had to add a bathroom to it. There was a bunch of reasons why. It didn't fit anymore. We had too many people. There was no parking. And they moved it to Rescue 7. But it was never replaced. And I don't believe it was ever staff's intention not to have a rescue car back there. There was never anything in writing that said that they were going to put one back. But it just seems like you left one of the largest, most needed units in the city. You left it bare for 17 years, and we've drawn in other rescue cars out of the other very important parts of the city into that area. So it's definitely a need. I don't know why we keep kicking the can. They're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole with another 12-hour car, paying it time and a half when you could pay straight time, just reallocate some manpower. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Councilman Goods, Councilman Carlson had a question. Do you have anything further? Or? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I wonder, Joe, before you sit down, Mr. Greco, sorry. Sorry. Do you have any way to quantify what the loss of life is or additional injury from people not being able to get services quickly?
We run every call in this city. Everybody gets to a hospital. It has to do with, if you look back historically over time, and I'll give you some quick numbers. In '84, we ran 25,000 calls. This year, we'll run approximately 90,000 calls, give or take. It could be 92, it could be 91, somewhere in that neighborhood. So over time, we have an increased manpower in this city. We've actually shrank manpower in the city. We did add some stations in the north end, but they didn't take anything out of the city. So I don't think that we're pulling, that we're causing anybody loss of life, or that citizens should be afraid that they don't have anybody. What it does is it delays the person getting there. So if you had a couple calls in that district, you would have rescue cars coming out of Station 18 at 34th and Hillsborough, or a station downtown going into that area, or potentially taking one out of Robles Park into that area, leaving those areas blank from ALS coverage. So we pick up everybody. We don't leave anybody out there hanging. But it just takes longer to get there because they're coming from a farther distance. That is one of the most needed areas in the city. And like I said, we've been talking about it for years and years and years. I don't know why that rescue car never went back in. Like I said, I don't think it was ever fire staff's intention or city's intention to not put one back. I believe it just happened and it never got picked back up. There is staffing for it. They're going to have to use manpower more effectively. But they're staffing for it and the rescue cars there, so I don't think you have to increase budget to do it. I think I read somewhere that they want $590,000 in overtime money to pay for a 12-hour car when it's not necessary at all. We need to restaff with some. We have 2 unassigned lieutenants now. We only need to promote 1, which we have 8 on the list. And you have your 3 lieutenants. Now you have to take some people off of rescue cars that are their Jerry personnel at that station and put them at a full-time assignment. Which would be Station 16 or wherever the city staff and fire staff would decide they wanted it. 16 would be the the most advantageous because it has room for it. Station 10 does not have room for it. It could backfill all the necessary areas. So to answer your question, I don't think anybody's being left out there not having a rescue car ascertained as they need it. It just takes a little longer to get there. Remember, we all have fire trucks that get there first. Fire trucks are first responders, and we're paramedics on all the fire trucks now. So they get someone there to work on them. They just don't have somebody to take them to the hospital as quick as what they could have, sir. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Council?
Well, thank you, Mr. Grego, for your assessment. It's very important. But generally, I still maintain sometime tonight I'm going to bring both those issues back up possibly for a motion because I think they're warranted. The community deserves it, and we don't need to be pushed back any longer.
Anyone else before we take a break? Let me say something, if I may. You know, there's that old, what album's that from? Let It Bleed, last song, Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. It's a great song. When I look at this budget, the issue is what do we need and what is a need in terms of things. There were certain things that I had submitted early on for the budget, some of which have come out, some of which haven't. Budgets aren't always black and white. There's always a lot of gray in a budget. I've never voted for a budget just in my 2.5 years on council where I go, there's nothing bad in that and everything's good. And I voted for 2 budgets. There's a lot of different issues in there. You know, one thing now, Councilman Goods, this is a senior center you're talking about? An arts?
It would be senior multicultural so that you have, seniors can have their say and the community can have their say as well. We've outgrown the NFL Jet Center. We have no WOW. We have no place where our kids can dance, have performances. We have to travel, have vans and buses take our kids way to other areas of the city. I think that's unfair. It's not realistic for them to do so.
And to Mr. Rajero, let me ask, sir, has there been any design of this endeavor yet, or is this just an idea that has been forwarded this year without a design?
And I apologize, Council, I was talking the design of...
Councilman Goods proposed East Tampa, the cultural senior center. There has been no design funded.
Not to my knowledge.
I would think not.
And my staff is telling me there has not been.
Okay. Just to put it out there, for example, in fiscal year 2018 budget, I proposed to their Mayor Buckhorn that we fund a design for an autism park to take place in New Tampa. I wanted to see that park as part of this budget. We'll be pushing hard for it next year, certainly. But that's certainly a good step. I just suggest as a potential compromise, which is a design for something like that. Because before you do construction, you got to do design. Just my experience.
With all due respect to the chairman, and again, I respect what you're saying, but we've been in the design mode for years over there. We've been asking for designs for years. I've got a CRA that has money that we've been asking and having roadblocks that we can't do, so we shouldn't do that. But why? We have a CRA that has money for infrastructure. I'm just tired of the pushback. And I'm sorry that I understand we have budgeted items, but we have to look at what our needs are now. Mr. Miranda said it perfectly, our elderly and our children. And I'm just sorry that people feel that, hey, it's just East Tampa, you know, they're always yelling and crying, but we yell and cry because we get nothing. And this budget should have had some type of wow so our community can see that, hey, this council, this administration see the needs, we understood, we heard your cries. And I'm just not backing off, however it goes, but I can't back out, and I have to be the bullet pit horn for my community and for my district. And I'm not backing off of the issue that we can allocate money for that senior/cultural arts center for our kids over in East Tampa and a full-time fire rescue car, gentlemen.
And
I yield back.
And I want to check with the administration, y'all's position on these changes on fire in Councilman Good's district, what net effect, if any, that would have on the budget, just so we have a clear picture of all positions, just, I guess, after our break, I guess. So, any further questions before we have a 10-minute break? Okay, we shall return in 10 minutes. Yes, sir. Thank you. City Council returns. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Okay, we return. Councilman Carlson had a comment and/or question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. We have a new council, a new mayor. Three of us here were on the Charter Review Commission, and we reviewed the powers of the mayor versus the city council. But it seems to me that a lot of what's being done in terms of relationship between city council and mayor is tradition or custom, instead of starting with the spirit of the charter and moving beyond that. And it seems like it's setting up lots of conflicts. I wish in the budget that we could look differently going forward. There were a lot of, true or not, there were a lot of accusations that the last mayor would ridicule city council and say they have no power other than to approve my budget. And I talked last time about counting to four. This mayor has said to me privately, and I'm sure to you all too, that this is not how she wants to operate. She wants to work in a collegial way. I hope that whatever happens tonight, with John here and Dennis and others, I hope that next year we can come up with a new process instead of doing whatever the custom was before, whatever muscle memory there is from the last 8 years. I hope that we can look at it differently for the next 4 years and think about how we can engage in a different way. This mayor inherited this budget mostly because it's partway through the year, and I hope that next year, as we look at it in April, whenever Dennis said last time that we can maybe give our input as a group and have a collegial conversation early on, and then try to give indication of where we could go so that by the time we're here, we won't end up with these kinds of discussions. And however we vote tonight, I think the intent of city council and the mayor is to have a collegial relationship, and so hopefully we can work together on a process going forward. Sorry to talk so long, but that just in intent, I wanted to say that.
Nothing wrong with that. Anyone else at this time? Councilman Dingfelder, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Goods, Councilman Goods made some good points. He asked some good questions as related to the two large issues that he's been talking about for a while. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Bennett, Chief of Staff Bennett, has any responses specifically to his two issues, and then I'll talk about the issue that I was concerned about.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you again, John Bennett, Chief of Staff. I appreciate being invited up to talk through these things. As you know, the memo was issued in the spirit of collegial effort here to try and bring the right assessment to the entire city about placing the right facilities, the right programs, the right things in the right spots for here and tomorrow. We know we have demographic shift. I know that, and of course the administration knows, and you've said it tonight, that the administration is new, but that doesn't mean the requests have not been going on and on and on like it's been mentioned. I think this is a valiant attempt from the administration to the community mostly, to say that we are going to look at this comprehensively. We're going to make sure that the facilities go, and the programs, most importantly, whether it's seniors or youth, go in the right location that will last and be sustainable and resilient as Tampa shifts its society and social contracts between government and the community, and also the private sector. There's a lot of private sector opportunities out there that are supported by the city, and we need to understand what their programs are and where their programs are and which ones are empty and which ones are full. So this is a way of the administration coming back off of the ask for East Tampa, off of the ask of the Autism Park, and saying, where should these things go? It doesn't have to drag out. It's a commitment. This has been I've been part of an action-driven government process for 35 years. It's not going to slow down now. So I think the commitment of $400,000 is different than what a commitment was to study in previous scenarios. This is real. It's designed to put the right things in the right spot. It's not going to be a Band-Aid, and I think we have the chance to go forward. And I said it before, co-create government together, which means that with council, the administration, and most importantly, the community that we serve has an opportunity to put the right facilities in the right spot from here going forward. I think we can build off of the best practices that have occurred. I had a chance to be in West Tampa during the Bridges to Business, an amazing programmatic conversation with the staff there about what they do. Been in other parks. I've spent most of my time in East Tampa, 30 years of it, predominantly in North Tampa. So I had a lot of chance to see the programs that happen there. but how do they align with the changing times and the demographics and the opportunities? We have a responsibility to be efficient, effective, and equitable. And I live by those 3 E's. I think the administration lives by those 3 E's, and I think that's what you're seeing with that 400,000. As it relates to the East Tampa fire rescue response, when that came up, the first thing I ask questions is level of service. To make it really simple from my understanding, is that you have a time distance thing when it comes to rescue service, and then you have density. How many calls do you have? So you have concurrency, you have all those kind of things. The opportunity we had in the budget at this point in time, and while that may not be the final answer, at least it is something to try and go forward, was to purchase an asset that would work for 16, and then try and figure out how to move. Once I get more data, working with the fire staff, is how do we move from peak to full-time? The number that I was given to put a unit in and staff it with 8 personnel was $1.1 million. Obviously, we had an opportunity to not do that and put it in the budget adjustment. So what the recommendation was is to buy the asset, buy the rescue car, and then staff it with this peak analysis that would serve the community until such time we could put a permanent asset in, not to mention the review of Station 10 and whatever kind of retrofits or updates that Station 10 needs. But in the meantime, we knew that 16, as you heard earlier from the fire unit, could house the unit. But there's still more work to be done. This is not by any means the final answer. This is the beginning of trying to accommodate to make sure that East Tampa has the right level of service and make sure that they get the response times that are warranted. We heard the numbers about the gap between Rescue 4 and the east side of town, and this was the recommendation of the fire staff within the confines of the budget that was balanced and delivered on August 1st to be able to do something until we can figure out how to put a full-time asset in place.
Any further questions, comments? Councilman Dingfeld.
So in a nutshell, I think what I heard is that you have a commitment to Councilman Goods over this next year that you'll continue to seriously evaluate the 24-hour asset for the unit.
Well, I mean, I heard the union counter today that the personnel are in place. That's a conversation I need to have with the fire staff and try and understand, because to the point is we want to do things efficiently and effectively, which means we want to deliver the right service. We want to do it for the best value. And at the same time, we want to make sure the entire city is getting the same equitable outcomes that everybody else is. I was a stickler with that in the crime fight. I'm going to be a stickler with that in all of our public safety and infrastructure services in conjunction with our great staff.
So in regard to parks, I guess I'm hearing the commitment from you and the administration that master plan, that master evaluation and plan for $400,000 would include the autism park as well as the recreation center. In terms of reviewing it, analyzing it, obviously you got to look at the costs and that sort of thing, and maybe it's a 2 or 3 year plan to get there, because nothing happens overnight, especially when it's a big budget item. But not looking for any commitment more, but just the commitment that master plan is going to take a serious look at what Councilman Goods and Chairman Vieira have spoken to.
And I think the genesis of the concept of the master plan was just that. It was not to put study money in a vacuum for one thing, but to look comprehensively, because what tends to happen is the study money goes in and then other things happen, the economy changes. We have a responsibility, as it's been said across the board, to take care of our youth, our elderly, and everybody in the middle, as well as making sure we have that inclusive recreation. We have all the things, including dog parks, and all of those things need to be studied comprehensively. But I think to the point that I'm hearing is the things that have been come up over and over again, whatever they need in East Tampa, whatever they need in North Tampa, West Tampa, the bottom line is it needs to be looked at comprehensively. And this money was increased as opposed to being spotty to make sure that was done. I want to add to that is, it's been conveyed. We know it's coming. There's other funding opportunities out there than what's currently in the budget. We have a Super Bowl coming. I've worked the last several of them. I know how that works. I know what it infuses in the community. All those things get a chance to be mapped into the plan. And my hope is that it doesn't take that long, that we actually hit the ground running and start doing things. I've been on the phone with the Parks Director about these very things in all the categories we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, the last thing I'd like is more of a comment than a question, is Mr. Bennett and I have worked together for a long time, 15, 16 years off and on. And we've developed a level of trust. In regard to the TBAE issue, which 5 of us voted for the other day, we don't have an agreement yet. And they're looking for a vote tonight on the budget without that agreement, which I'm willing to vote for. I'm willing to vote in good faith. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that, and part of the problem is it's hurricane. You know, we were working pretty well for a couple of days until the hurricane threatened. All of a sudden, Mr. Bennett's working 15 hours a day on his hurricane prep, and I didn't bother him with this issue because obviously it's minor in comparison. But now here we are today. I'm willing to vote on the budget as proposed. I think it's fair. I think it's fair what he's suggested to you and to Mr. Chairman about your issues, because we're just starting out. We're all just starting out. We're three months into this whole thing, except for a couple of you who've been here a little longer. So I'm willing to go with the budget. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that over the next when's the next budget hearing scheduled? 17th.
14 days from today.
Okay, thank you. That by the 17th, that maybe hopefully we'll have something worked out to respect the 5-2 vote that this council took the other day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Councilman Goods and then Carlson. Go ahead.
Chief of Staff, I respect your comments. And I know you've always been a fair man. And I had to go back in my office and sit down and think about what I said, the comments I said. And as I got up, I made a couple of phone calls to some of my constituents and asked were they watching. They said, we're watching. And I said, my mind is puzzled right now because, you know, as black people, we always are made promises. We're made promises all the time. And it hurts so bad when I hear we're going to do it. And then we come back, well, it didn't work out that way. The money fell short. And I'm not saying I don't trust the administration. I want to be clear on that. But as a black man who's been let down before because of promises, it hurts that I'm asking for things that are legitimate. I'm asking what's owed to us, what's owed to that community. And it bothers me that I just can't get something. I can't even get the damn rescue car full time. I gotta fight for a rescue car. Okay, we want to tit and tap about the park for the kids and the seniors who all they want to do is go out and have a good time. There are other funding sources already. You got community block grants. I asked Tom Snelling to send me a list of, I haven't got a list yet of the community block grants for the area. I know we are. There's money there. I got a CRA, there's money. I just think it's unfair. It's unfair. And this council knows it. That's why you hear what they're saying, because they know it. It's unfair and unrealistic to say we can't do not a dang thing for 5. I got other areas in 5 that certain people ask for things and we make a compromise. We find a way. I go to Tampa Heights. We find a way to get a CRA to make that area boom for certain people. We find a way. Damn it, I want to find a way for the middle core. Find a way. I can't be in support of anything if I can't get something for a community that's been underserved for many, many years. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. And Councilman Carlson? No? Okay. I'll say something that Councilman Dingfelder, and building on what Councilman Good said, I know if we go forward here today, especially with the master plan, I think that we would be stepping out in faith, to look at next year, and with reasonable, very reasonable expectations that the things that we're compromising on today, prospectively compromising on today, will be there. I think it's 100% certain to say that this council is 7-0 behind the idea of an autism park in New Tampa. And I know it's a fact that this council is 7-0 behind not only a senior and arts center in East Tampa, but other endeavors and other initiatives in East Tampa. To say that East Tampa is underserved is one heck of an understatement, and we all know that. We all know that. It's been demonstrated tonight, as far as I'm concerned, in this week with regards to public safety issues and the additional investments that Councilman Goods has fought for and been able to move the needle on that issue. I think we should all be proud of that. And that's certainly true with regards to recreational activities for families, seniors, et cetera, et cetera. That's certainly something that if we were to go forward here tonight, we would be stepping out in good faith. We've had a lot of private discussions on a lot of the concerns that I had, some of the issues with regards to Copeland Park, Tacoma Park. We've been able to have some good resolutions on. Some other issues we've continued until next year. And again, that's stepping out in good faith. And also something that Councilman Dingfelder said, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this. It doesn't have necessarily to do with a budget, but it was the fact that you, Mr. Bennett, have had trial by fire, so to speak. You come on when the hurricane comes, and now this issue. And so that's certainly something that we recognize. So we just for whatever that counts, we appreciate that. But again, if we go forward here tonight with this master plan, we're thinking of a master plan, and it's stepping out in good faith. And I certainly think that's something that's important to know, if we were to. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay, well, next, if council has nothing else to say, we would motion to adopt the tentative millage rate, and thereafter motion to vote on the ordinance first reading. And with regards to the tentative millage rate, it is the pleasure of council.
This requires a motion to accept the millage rate as described by Councilman Miranda.
Okay, Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I chair the Finance Committee. I move an ordinance adopting the budget for the fiscal year for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019.
I'm sorry, Mr. Miranda. If we can just have to begin with a motion just to adopt the millage rate, and then we'll go into the ordinance.
All right.
We'll do it as two motions, please.
Well, I got to find it first.
Actually, it just requires your statement of.
I move to adopt the millage rate, which is, just 1 second, got to find it here. 6.2076 mils.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Councilman Miranda, a second, I believe, by Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Councilman Carlson, sir.
Just, I've asked this question privately, but just for anybody who's watching and seeing this for the first time, can someone just confirm that that's the same as last year?
Yeah, it's the same as last year.
Confirm, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thereafter we do a motion to vote on ordinance or first reading, and I believe Councilman Miranda would do that. And any questions before we move forward? I want to make sure we're going to be doing the ordinance on first reading. I do that in respect to my colleagues here. Anybody else have any motions, any comments before?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not satisfied. I probably want to put two motions on the floor.
Okay. Mr. Shelby, if Councilman Goods has additional motions with regards to spending priorities, with regards to the budget, et cetera, should that be done before the first reading ordinance?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Yes.
Could you just tell us legally what's the effect of a motion now? Does it,
Sal, to the legal department, the motion is putting it on the record that that is what you want to move forward. It is not adopting anything.
Okay. A sentiment, if you will.
Yes.
If I can, Mr. Torito, a question. If council wanted to have that done by the adoption of the budget rather than have the, a post-adoption budget resolution recommended by the mayor based on the conversations, would that have to be done, or should that have to be done by motion tonight? In other words, to come back at second reading if that was council's pleasure.
I'm not following with you.
If council wanted, this is the recommended budget by the mayor. The mayor proposes the budget, recommends it per the charter. It is now council's decision to choose whether to adopt it tonight, or make amendments to it if it so chooses. Whether that is a policy decision is up to council. The question is, they legally can do that tonight if that's their pleasure. Would you agree?
That's correct.
Okay. But the mechanism to do that would require a resolution or a change to the budget to be brought back at second reading, if it were to pass.
If Sal Tree, Legal Department, if there was a move tonight to change the budget tonight, then they're not adopting the budget as presented.
That's correct.
So what you'd have to be doing is asking them to go back tonight and make those changes to bring back to you on second reading. There's two options that you have, really. One of them is if they're not major changes, they can be made between the first and second reading. If they're major changes, you'd have to make those recommendations tonight. The other thing that you can do is what we talked about earlier, is that if you get a commitment from the administration that if these motions are made, that they will follow through on them, then there's no need to change this budget, because the administration would then come back in October on the first reading, on the first meeting that you have in October, and propose those budget changes.
And so that council knows that with regard to the budget, the mayor does have the power within the charter for a line item veto. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So then in order to sustain a veto from the mayor, it would require at least 5 votes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councilman Carlson.
So just to be clear, there is a mechanism to amend the budget. It's not just a recommendation. There is a mechanism to amend, to approve it as amended.
Yes, it's a more involved process, but it has been done in the past, yes.
Councilman Goods, did you wish to make your motion, sir?
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, make it clear before I make this motion, I need to amend with my motion what I'm proposing for to go into the current budget now, correct?
Well, if I understand what your intent is, normally what's been done in the past is it's actually a twofold process. Number one is if you're asking for money to be added from the budget, normally it's been the administration's position that council would have to make the decision of what the funding source would be as part of the motion. That's the way we've done it in the past, Mr. Torito?
The budget you've been proposed is a finite budget. You have to move money around. It's not a matter of appropriating more money. There's only so much money coming in. You have to move money. You have to tell them where the money is being moved from and to.
And if I may, sir, so now that we've approved the millage rate, in other words, we are within I don't want straitjacket, whatever you want to call it. We're within a pant size.
Right. The millage rate can be lowered at your next meeting. It cannot be raised.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Go ahead. Anyone else? Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to make the motion that the $2 million that was asked for the Community Cultural Arts Center be allocated from the reserve funds for approval as an amendment.
Second for purposes of discussion and vote.
Okay. So let's second for discussion. Let's discuss. Thoughts, Council?
Is there a design or plan or anything for this $2 million center? Has it been discussed? Is there anything or no?
If I can, just for the purposes, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Rojero, but if you could put into the context of the capital improvement plan and how these kind of projects fit into the present budget, Would this be in addition then to the capital improvement plan as proposed?
I'm sorry, would this be an
Would this
additional
be
what?
would this then be in addition to the capital improvement plan as it's been proposed? Because the capital improvement plan sets forth a 5-year plan for budget programs.
It would, to answer your question, it would, if approved, amend or revise the submitted capital improvement program. In answer to your question, Council, no, there has not been a design or anything like that yet. You heard the Chief of Staff say, we anticipate the needs of the entire community will be incorporated as part of that master plan, and I would guess that a potential community center in Al Barnes would be part of that master plan. Or the potential for it, I should say, yes.
And since the motion says taking money out of the reserves, where do the reserves need to be at? 20%, or what is that percentage? And where are they now? 23%?
Our policy is 20%.
Okay.
We have submitted a recommended budget that maintains it, and I'm going to come back to that word maintains it at 23%. In a nutshell, we want to maintain, and in an ideal world, actually increase it to maintain and maybe improve our credit ratings. And the reason I keep saying maintain is further to our discussion earlier. Just 2 years ago, our general fund balance was $96 million and 23%. You've received a submitted budget that, as you've heard, is $106 million, $10 more million, and yet the percentage is still 23%. Because the percentage is always based on our expenditures, and as our budget and expenditures go up, the money required to maintain that percentage goes up. So we've added $10 million, but from the credit ratings perspective, we've merely maintained our financial strength. Just something to consider.
So 106 million, taking out the 2 million, 104 million puts us at what, like 22 and change percent? Or
Something along, yeah. Something along those lines.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilman.
Let me ask a question, and you mentioned credit rating. What, if any, effect would, in your opinion, and I know you're not in charge of giving us a credit rating, due to the credit rating of the city of Tampa? I know we, for 2 or 3 years, did extraordinary to get it where it's at today. It was, and then we had to, from 08 on, we had a downfall, and all of us suffered. The whole country suffered.
Yes, sir.
Not only the city of Tampa. So, how do the raters rate, credit raters, Finch and whatever you want to call them all, Wall Street rate our ratings? Where some are AA, some are AAA, some are plus, some are minus. What effect, does that do to the credit rating as far as making the payments? When you pay off you bank your payments, does the interest rate going to go up?
Yes, sir. In simplest terms, we risk, and I would bet we guarantee that the interest payments on any debt we incur will go up. It'll be based primarily, frankly, on 2 things. The funding source and why we're incurring the debt. We have any number of debt issuances that have really, really good credit ratings. And then we have an issuer credit rating, which basically speaks to your capability and willingness to pay your financial obligations. That is one of primary importance to us, is that general issuer credit rating be maintained. And if we can, improved, although we're very, very high right now. But that's a long answer. The short answer is yes, we risk paying more for debt we intend on incurring in the future.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other comments, questions? You know, my big challenge is when it comes to the $2 million that's being sought, having some sort of a, well, let me ask you, this master plan, does that create a design for this? Or is the design still not a location, a design, the traditional avenues that we look at for developments of parks and other?
A few things that could happen. We'll take the results of that master plan, which again, ideally will tell us what and where we need community-wide. And then we'll identify the projects that come from that master plan and identify funding sources for both the design and construction of any of those projects.
Okay.
So the master plan will simply give us some great information and great data as to what the needs are in the community.
Thoughts? Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, great comments from all of my colleagues here, but
Sorry.
when I look at what that reserve number is and the percentage, that's a pimple. I know the CFO was giving a good argument, but in real time, real money, $2 million ain't out of that 105 million, 106 million ain't really kicking the bucket. As far as design, we've been asking for designs for many, many years. And I contend, there is funding. There's funding in his current budget, and there's funding on a CRA that has close to going to be almost close to $6 million. So I don't see a shortfall there. I don't see if something came up that said there's an added expense, there's no way that CRA would not put that extra dollar amount to help fund the project. So as far as the design phase, if you got upfront money, you got money to build, you can build any kind of design you want. So for me, that's not a big argument for me. There's money in 2 or 3 different sources that we can get from to get this project moving.
Councilman Maniscalco, did you have a question?
No, just a comment. I'm going to support you because your community deserves it and a lot more. This is just the beginning. So you have my support on this.
Thank
I
you, sir.
understand it's a lot of money, but
Let me, oh, yes, sir, go ahead. No, please.
My number one goal in the budget was to increase the reserve. I think it was irresponsible the way it was burned down. And the recession ended in 2009, and we didn't stop pulling from it until 2014. But keeping the percentage at 23% is, I think, a great achievement by this mayor and Mr. O'Hara and the staff. The only thing that would convince me not to put the money in is East Tampa. I think it's reprehensible the way East Tampa and the African American community were treated in the last 8 years. I personally heard lots and lots of stories. We gave an award to someone a couple weeks ago who was personally treated very badly, and we need to do something to change that. And I hope that we'll do it through the CRA and whatever other vehicles we have. I wish it wasn't $2 million. I wish there was some other way that we could do it besides giving the full $2 million. But short of you coming up with a lower amount, I would support this only because I think we need to change the way the city treats East Tampa and the African American community. We can't continue to ignore it. And it's not just the activists that show up here every week. It's the average person who just feels like the city has ignored them. And the truth is that the city did for 8 years.
Anyone else? I have a question with regards to the $2 million. Was this, well, strike that. First question, CRA money. Can CRA money be used for this?
I believe it can.
Okay. And would that come out of the reserve CRA money?
It would.
That's what I thought.
It would not come from. Well, are you asking if it would come from this particular reserve
Yes,
we're
sir.
talking about? It would not. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, let's explore that possibility. I mean, if there's a consensus on council to invest more in East Tampa, consensus that I certainly support, and we can look at some sort of a compromise with CRA, but can that be done tonight? That's the challenge.
can't sit in
Exactly.
At the risk of interrupting you, sir,
No.
I would guess it can be done within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that appears to be a compromise where, and I'm just throwing out ideas here where we could take, 250,000, 500,000, whatever it may be, and then look to the CRA for the remainder. That's a possibility.
Well, along those lines, Councilman Dingfelder mentioned the money being swapped back and forth between the CRA and the convention center. Is there something like that, some kind of mechanism like that we can find?
I don't know enough about the CRA funding and the process. The deputy city attorney has wanted me to clarify or suggested I clarify, and I agree that it would be the CRA board that would have to take that action to give the money. Of course, that's you all, but under a different guise. I don't know if that semi-answers your question or not, sir.
I think, and if I may, I apologize for, I know other folks want to speak, that maybe some potentially amendment to the motion clarifying where funds could come from could maybe set council members at ease, my opinion, but
If I may, Mr. Chair, there was discussion with the East Tampa CRA that perhaps there could be a 50-50. $1 million coming from the CRA and $1 million coming from the City of Tampa's general fund or reserve fund. I think that would be a great compromise in this. If we get the East Tampa CRA to agree to that, I would be all for that, because that would leave me the $108,000 for TBA.
Did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'm willing to compromise and using CRA. You'll have my support as a CRA board member. You have my support here because it's, goes back to wants and needs. That community, like you said, you're hungry. And if I think back of, big things that happen in East Tampa, and I'm talking about beyond the downtown area in Ybor City, it's very oftentimes ignored. And this is our opportunity to make good on that and investing in that area.
Councilman.
Just one piece of feedback I've gotten from East Tampa community is don't use the CRA money for things the city would pay for in other areas. So if this kind of community center is something that typically a CRA would fund, then fine. But if folks in East Tampa see amenities being built in other parts of the city, but the same amenities are not being built in East Tampa or maintained in East Tampa, we need to make sure we maintain those. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I just threw that.
And you're correct, Mr. Carlson, and that was the point that was brought to me several times when I thought about the compromise at first. But then I got pushback from the community saying the city owes this to us, and they're right. Now they're willing to do whatever they need to do to help out, but there are other projects they want to do in East Tampa as well. And that's why I was steadfast about the $2 million now, because their content is the city is supposed to be doing capital improvement projects to communities, and they've been asking for this for over 8 years, hadn't happened. And if there's a shortfall with the project, whatever, that CRA can come in and give money to that project, and then we've got what we need. So that's why I was steadfast about the $2 million. But you're right, that's their concern, is projects that the city would normally do, they should be doing.
And let me, if I may, say something to that, which is we're dealing with a more constrained, conservative budget. Therefore, as it applies to this year, this isn't a project that's being done in other areas of the city. This isn't. We are willing to step out, I think, in a I don't want to say unorthodox fashion, but willing to step out in a more conservative, restrained year where such a compromise may be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I respect your leadership again, and I can compromise to the $1 million, and we get with the CRA chairman in reference to the other $1 million, or whatever extra dollars they may need for the project. But I'm sure they'll go along with that. But we need to make sure that we get some general for our revenue dollars for the project.
Sure.
If I may, sir. Councilman Goods, would you rather wait between first and second reading to make sure we have confirmation from the East Tampa CRA?
No, I don't think confirmation will be a problem with that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. To be honest with you, Mr. Citro, I think the bottom line is that we need to get a little ante up from the city's portion. I believe that the citizens of East Tampa, there's money there. They want to see some beautification in East Tampa. So I don't think that's going to be an issue, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Goods. Councilman Goods.
And yes, sir.
I would say, Council, if I can just clarify a few things. Again, there's been no design, there's been no cost estimate that I'm aware of associated with this community center. So from our perspective, from a financial perspective, there's no basis for a $2 million figure. We simply don't know enough now. Secondly, again, hopefully I've explained the potential ramifications associated with reducing your fund balance from a credit rating perspective. I would also remind you, as we forecast the future, we see continuing challenges ahead. Again, pick up the paper, watch the TV, and depending on what time it is, the economy's doing great or the economy's not doing great. My point is, you will recall our discussion about shoring up the reserves in the past and dipping into them to get us through the Great Recession. I would remind Council that, in our opinion, challenges remain from a financial perspective ahead of us.
Mm-hmm. If I may comment towards that, that is one concern that I have, which is that, and again, and I'm willing to go on board with this, but a big concern that I have is that we don't have a design for this. That there's no land where this would be placed on. We have an aspiration, a great aspiration that I think we can get behind, but part of that $2 million if this thing goes through, would have to go to design, correct? I would think so.
Yes, we'd
Yeah.
have to find a funding source for design.
Yeah, I mean,
Separate
so-
apart from construction.
Yeah, yeah. There would be a big issue of expectations, I think, just to be frank. you
Mr.
know.
Chairman, again, I'm just gonna say the word hogwash, man. I don't believe that. $1 million is nothing to a $1 billion budget. I don't care how you look at it. $1 million is nothing. If you're gonna give me a fire truck at $600,000, you telling me $1 million bucks? Come on, let's get real. Let's get really real here. I don't believe that one iota. And I've just got to say that. It's unrealistic to even say that. $6 million and take $1 million out of that? That's going to kill our rating? No, sir, that's not going to kill our rating. I don't believe that. And nobody, any financial wisdom would say that $1 million, that's not going to kill our rating. So I stand steadfast. We have a big old huge park out there that's dormant, ain't really nothing going on, that center can go on. You know, and I know for a fact what the East Tampa CRA has in their coffers. If we gave them $1 million, they could help to fund the rest. That's what the community wanted. They've been asking for it. I don't care hearing about no design, whatever, or phase to get it done. If there's money in both those funds, it can be built. Period.
Sir.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall, the motion on the floor presently and seconded for discussion purposes was for the $2 million, and that's where we stand now presently?
I can take it off the table for the bill.
Or you can move to,
It's not a problem.
well, if that's the case, then a motion to amend would be in order. Or,
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to reduce it from $2 million to $1 million for the funding.
That's the second amendment.
And yes, sir.
Marty, Mr. Shelby, should we specify, should we give more specificity to it? To the point that Mr. O'Hara was making, that we don't know where we're going to be, when this will be implemented. Should it go into some kind of budget or account?
well, as of now, the funding source was the undesignated fund balance, as I recall.
That's my understanding.
But beyond that, your question is?
Should he put more specificity around it? I think he said for a community center. What were the words used?
That's what.
It's a senior/cultural arts center, so it'll be utilized for seniors, cultural arts, gymnastics, whatever. But it will be
and where exactly did you
Al
say?
Barnes Park.
Okay. Is there any other specificity that we need?
At this point, Mr. O'Hara, I don't believe so.
Since you've asked, the only thing I could offer is we simply don't know if $2 million will be enough or too little, because we don't have a design.
And would this then, as a result, be added to the capital improvement plan?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't.
As a result of this motion, assuming that it would ultimately pass, and would it be added to the capital improvement?
Yeah, we reflected in the capital improvement program beginning fiscal year 20.
Call the vote.
Let's call the vote.
All right.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments before we proceed to vote? Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Councilman Goods, a second by Councilman Dingfelder. All in support? Aye. Any opposed?
Now, if I may inquire of Mr. Torito, then what then is the process for tonight?
Sal, through the legal department, between the first and second reading, they'll bring the budget change back to you, or they can come back with a resolution that'll come to you after, in the October meeting, depending on how you want to do it and how the administration, if the administration says they will change the budget after the budget is approved, and you take them at their word, which they've always have in the past, you can do it that way. Or they'll have to make a change in the budget that comes back to you for second reading.
And if I may, to clarify in terms of our direction, that motion was directing that fund to come from the reserves, correct? That was the specificity. Okay, just to make sure.
Thank you.
From the money that was going to be allocated to the reserves.
Yes,
in
sir,
this
from
budget.
the increase, correction. Yes, sir.
Is there a question from staff?
Can I get a clarifying question? I understand what was motioned and what was voted on, but is it, and I heard the clarification or the specificity on the reserves, but is it the source of the funding or the funding that's recommended? And my point being to what I talked about earlier is, there's a CRA strategic plan, of course, for each community, and I respect that pot of money and how that process works. But if just using the target of $2 million, does it really matter the source as long as we reach the goal between the design and build? And the reason I'm saying that is if the reserves, seem to be in jeopardy as reviewed by the administration, is there a different funding source that's eligible to reach the goal? So if I'm making myself clear, does it matter what the funding source is? And I'll just be explanatory. Could it be a grant? Could it come from the NFL Super Bowl money? Could it come from, is it the target or is it the funding source that's on the table?
Yeah, I think I would suggest that we exclude the CRAs because that's a separate body that would make a separate decision, and we're looking to get grant money from there. But if the administration goes back and sharpens a pencil and figures out where else the money would come from and moving things around,
I'm fine with it.
Should we make an amendment to our amendment?
Mm-hmm. And sir.
Mr. Bennett, I hear where you're coming from, but I'm not sure we can do that tonight because I think what I've heard from legal is we need some specificity in our motion in terms of where it's going and where it's coming from in our motion, and that's what the motion was that passed. What I would suggest is, let's say a month from now, when the dust settles, if there's a better idea from Dennis and his gang, just come back to us with a budget amendment, because every single agenda has budget amendments, and you guys could say, look, we don't think that's the best place, and I don't think the maker of the motion really cares where the money comes from necessarily, but it could be in the form of the budget amendment, as opposed to trying to wrestle with that tonight, because I don't know that we can. I don't think we can leave it loose in the air, or I think it's a little riskier to leave it loose in the air and just say, you guys find the money over the next 2 weeks. I think if you just did it right now out of the reserve, and like I say, come back a month from now, if you got a better plan, then I'm sure this council will be amenable to it.
And I appreciate that feedback. In the spirit of the conversation, I just want to make sure that the administration respects the fact, hence the $400,000 for the study, is that we want to make sure we apply equity and opportunity, efficiency and effectiveness in the deliverables citywide. And if that lands in Al Barnes Park, then that's fantastic. The funding source, to me, to reach the goal is part of our responsibility and leadership to make sure that we can sustain the reserves, but yet meet the goals of the community. And that's all I'm suggesting, is that if we find an alternative funding source to meet those goals in the right communities at the right spot at the right time for the right programming, is council philosophically agreeable that whatever the funding source is to reach the goal is agreeable.
Can I ask a question of legal? Between the first and second reading, or by the second reading, can the administration just come back and say, we suggest that come out of this bucket instead of the one we recommended, or does it have to stand as it is?
I would think that's certainly possible, and if that's not the case at the time, then you could come with the resolution.
You could, the suggestion that I'm thinking about is maybe to amend the motion to give it more flexibility, because right now you're kind of locking it in. If it comes from another source between now and then, like I said, you're careful where the money's coming from. And the other thing is that you also have the option is if other money comes in, that money can then be used to replenish the reserve that you've taken the money out of. The way you've done it right now, you give it no flexibility at all. And if they come back, someone may have another idea for the money. We found $1 million, we want to spend it here, but now we don't want to put it back in the reserves, we want to spend it on a different project. So you've really locked it in the way you've done it right now, and that's your decision, but you really locked it in.
Well, can I finish? I'm very happy that the administrators and the mayor focused on the reserves. I think it's very important to do that. So if we can provide any flexibility, I don't know how we would word it, but I think we would exclude CRA, but I don't know, I'm making up these words, but if we amended it to say that we propose that it would come from the money intended to increase the general fund reserve, however, we would be open to suggestions by the administration to other funding, right? And you don't care where it comes from.
I don't care where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, and if I may, I mean, technically we could have $350,000 from the reserve and some additional funds from other sources. I'm sure that, I'll speak for myself, which is that certainly we've had discussions on, like I said, issues like Tacoma Park, Copeland Park, et cetera, et cetera. I would trust that it wouldn't come from those funds, obviously. But whenever it comes to other issues, certainly we can, have a discussion on that.
If I could make one capstone, hopefully capstone comment, is providing flexibility. The administration was not going to recommend $400,000 to come back and not look for funding to facilitate those outcomes. And that's the spirit of, I think, what we're advising is that, once the studies are done, then you want to put those into action. I mean, why would you want to spend $400,000 if you weren't going to break ground? And so the idea of looking for funding of where the right spot is to break ground, balance the programs and all those things, that's the intent of the $400,000. I think what I'm trying to propose is to make sure that whatever funding source we're looking for to break ground in whatever community is that there's flexibility to do that, to get the right outcome citywide, which goes back to that equity aspect, to give everybody an opportunity to thrive no matter what demographic you're residing in.
I'm good for whatever funding source can come from for that $1 million for Alpine Parks. I'm good with that. That $400,000, wherever it needs to come from to your study, I'm good with that too. But that $1 million that I want for Al Barnes, it can come wherever you can find it, but it doesn't have to come from reserve if there's a better source that you have. So
Thank you.
I'm good with that, Mr. Carlson.
I just wanted to get that clarified.
Do we make a motion?
If that's your motion, if you could restate the motion.
Should we do the motion? You want me to make a motion?
So it would be a motion, it would be, the appropriate thing would be a motion to amend with regard to an alternative funding source.
Probably Councilman Booth would have to do that, I think.
Well, it's whoever wants to.
Whoever.
It doesn't make a difference, but if it's Councilman Booth's motion, that's fine as well.
I'd like to make the motion to amend the previous motion, reference the allocation of funds from $1 million to Al Barnes Park, and that allocation come from any form of funding source within the city budget.
And, pardon?
Well, CRA
With the exception of the CRA, and it's your desire then to have that determined by the administration and brought back to council by second reading of the budget on the 17th? Is that the date?
17th, yes.
That's fine.
You've included exception of the CRA.
Yeah.
Right, we'll have some CRA.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, then you made your motion from the original $2 million. After then I said, well, why don't we look at the CRA to make $1 million and $1 million from the city? So then your motion better be $2 million again.
What?
If you're excluding the CRA.
Well,
Councilman Carlson keeps saying, let's exclude CRA, let's exclude CRA.
No, I think the original motion, which I think that we approved was
CRA is not even on the table.
for $1
because
million.
We can't do anything with CRA.
It was just $1 million from the city, and then sitting as the CRA, we all kind of verbally said that we would be supportive of finding other
So
funding.
let's not even talk about CRA. We're just talking merely the $1 million from the city.
I only bring up CRA because he mentioned
Yeah,
it, and so that first $1 million would not come from the CRA. Maybe a matching $1 million, but the first $1 million would not. And do we need to recommend that do we need to say that we recommend that it come from a specific source? Because I think that language came from your recommendation to make an amendment.
I don't believe so.
No, we don't want to.
And just for purposes of the calendar, the CRA does meet between now and the second reading of the budget.
That's what I was referring to earlier.
Okay, we have
If I
an,
just have to clerk if that motion is acceptable.
I seconded the motion.
okay, we have an amended motion by Councilman Goods, a second by Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Last and final for me for tonight, in reference to the fire rescue cart in East Tampa. Again, I'm humbled that we tried to make some concessions, but we didn't cross the finish line. I think we can get there. The fire department has talked about that. Chief of Staff said he's going to look into that. So I hope that the administration will now go back and look into that before our second reading, that we can look at making that cart a full-time cart in East Tampa. So I'm leery if I should make that motion now or if I should just go ahead and hold it. The staff will go back and address that.
No, I'm 100% committed to going back and look at it. I mean, what I've heard tonight is that a level of staffing is in place, and if that's ultimately going to save the city money and provide a level of service, That's the right thing to do. But in the meantime, the spirit of what was offered in the memorandum was to make sure we're moving the needle forward, to make sure the level of service is meeting the requirements and not impact the budget to any great severity pending a full-time asset. But if the data is saying otherwise, then I'm happy to go back and review that.
I wish you would do that. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, next we move to and before we do the motion to vote on ordinance for first reading, I want to see if anyone else has any questions. Did you have anything, sir?
I would like to make a motion, and mine is minuscule. I feel like the woman in It's a Good Life asking for $7.50 is the $108,000 for the funding of TBA from any source possible that funding be included in the budget for $108,000.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, I'll say from my own view, I'm going to vote the same way I did before. I guess it was last Thursday when we voted on this, and my reason will be that, I don't mind going back for more money for things. Like, for example, the administration and I have had a very, very long dialogue over the last week for basic improvements. I could show you all the pictures of the upgrades that I've requested for Tacoma Park, for Copeland Park. You have a boardwalk out there that is literally sunken, and we're going to be working on that in this budget. Tacoma Park, a park near Bush Boulevard that needs a lot of TLC, and we're going to get some TLC in this budget. I'm very, very happy with that. I'm willing to fight for Councilman Good's projects in his district, which are real needs, and I'm proud to fight for that. With this, again, by coming with a budget request that I have for my district, standing with my friend Councilman Goods for that, I just can't do it to that level. I just must be true to myself in that regard, in terms of my beliefs and whatnot. So just my comments. And we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Citro, second by Councilman Niscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Nay. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Viera and Miranda voting no.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, and now before we go, I just want to make sure everybody's gotten everything out. Everything good to go?
Yes. Include the $108,000 to fund TBA.
AE.
TBA, excuse me.
But you didn't specify the specific funding source.
Dennis, please help me out on this one. Can we get that from the general funding?
We could take it from the general fund, in my
Thank you,
understanding.
from the general fund.
Okay. If I could just clarify one thing. My understanding was the motion was acceptable from any applicable funding source.
Yeah.
It was.
Yes.
It's the same reason you were giving us earlier, whether it be from a grant or whatever, as towards Councilman Goods' motion.
That was my understanding.
Yes.
Now, if I may clarify then, is that council's decision relative to making sure it's passed its second reading, or having an affirmation from the administration as to whether that would be acceptable to have it post-budget adoption to come back? Would that be able to be resolved by the second reading, a
I believe so,
determination?
yes.
Thank you.
For me, a simple handshake, which we just got.
Okay. Before we move the ordinance, anybody else have anything? Just making sure. Okay, to our much esteemed finance chair, Councilman Miranda, if you, sir, could motion to vote on ordinance first reading.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, an ordinance adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending September 30th, 2020, as presented by the mayor, providing for levy as such as provided by law of a tax on all taxable properties in the city of Tampa, and fixing the millage rate within the said city, making appropriations in accordance with the provisions of said budget, authorizing the director, the mayor, and city clerk as the proper authorities of the city of Tampa to certify the property appraisers of Hillsborough County, Florida, the millage should be levied for all purposes for the fiscal year 2020 in the city of Tampa, Florida, providing an effective date.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Miranda, a second by Councilman Citro. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, go ahead.
Viera.
Aye.
Goods.
Aye.
Maniscalco.
Aye.
Viera.
Aye.
Citro.
Aye.
Miranda.
Here? Yes. Here and aye. Some people vote and they're not here.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be on
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, if the council has anything else, may I have a motion to
Motion to
adjourn?
close the public hearing.
Yep, the motion to
Stephen
adjourn.
Paul.
That's just to close the public hearing. I
Okay,
believe
go
we can
ahead.
do
Yep,
motions
yes, go ahead.
afterwards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, and, I'm sorry, Councilman Dingfelder? Oh, I'm sorry, just making sure. We have a motion by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Citro, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we go to city council business. Councilman,
Is that on number one? We haven't touched number two yet.
what do you mean? I'm so sorry.
Is that public hearing on
For the capital improvement budget.
Southfield Legal Department, they were both done at the same time. That was the intention, that you did both at the same time. So this, what'll happen next time you come back on the 17th, you'll be voting on the second reading on the ordinance, and you'll also be taking up the resolution for approval at that time. But the public hearing covered both the operating and the capital budget.
Okay, so I don't have to motion separately.
You do, well, you could motion them separately, but you don't have to have any more public input, is what I was trying to say.
Okay, well,
A motion. They can't accept, all they're doing is, right now, is a motion to have the capital budget be heard on the 17th, maybe as
Okay.
close as you can get.
will anyone so move?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Citro, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and thank you for that, thank you. Okay, nothing, Councilman Miranda?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, that the council invite the council's Budget Advisory Committee to appear in front of the council for a 10-minute presentation on the recommendation and insight at the beginning of the second public hearing on September 17th at 5:01 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Citro, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Councilman Citro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jesuit High School is celebrating their 120th anniversary, and I would like for the council to present a commendation to Jesuit High School in celebration of their 120th anniversary, and it will be presented at their ceremony on September 11th.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Citro, a second by Councilman Maniscalco, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Anything else, sir?
Nothing else.
Sir?
I'd like to make a motion to present a commendation, and I'll take it to the event, for the 5th annual Beer and Bow Ties event for September 13th.
Second.
I've been there.
It's beer and bow ties. It's with, the money goes to the Crisis Center for
Yeah.
suicide prevention and whatnot.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, a second by Councilman Citro, all in favor? Any opposed?
And then I would like to present a commendation, which I'll bring to the radio station, for WMNF, which is getting ready to celebrate their 40th birthday, and that's going to be on September 14th.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, a second by Councilman Citro, all in favor? Any opposed?
That's it.
Councilman Woods.
Gentlemen, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this evening.
Sure.
It took a lot of guts to do what you did tonight. I'm sure the people of my district, especially East Tampa, are watching and most grateful that you kept your commitments. And I'm glad that you did too. And I just think that you just don't know how I feel right now to get the support I got tonight. Thank you all.
I can picture Frank Reddick right now going, you know, I had to fight for the outdoor bathrooms in the park, and this guy shows up after a couple of months and gets $2 million or $1 million. I know he's watching now. So
That's funny. Thank you, sir. Anything further, sir? Okay, thank you. Councilman Dingfelder.
In response to Councilman Goods, I think he was the one that had the guts tonight, and I'm proud that we could vote to support it. It's the right thing to do. In regard to commendation, I'd like to present one to the Aquila Institute, which is celebrating their 10th anniversary. This is a sort of a Tampa-based and started organization that went over to Rwanda to create a women's high school and now a college, and now they're going on further to create the Davis University after I guess the Davis family and the wonderful Cody Davis. But anyway, Elizabeth Davis has worked really hard with her staff on the Aquila Institute. They're having a gala in October, and I'll get you the date at a later time. I'd like to present the commendation there.
Yes, sir. Any seconds? We have a second by we have a motion by Councilman Dingfelder on a wonderful commendation. We have a second by Councilman Carlson. All in favor? Any opposed? Anything else, sir?
And that,
Oh,
and just for the record, Aquila is Akilah, Sandy.
okay. Anything further, sir?
That's all, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to receive and file. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Councilman Citro. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.